Hi guys, welcome to JSP channel. So so from today onwards we'll be having some interview sessions, and like parallelly we'll be starting our video sessions also. So there was a small break due to some reasons, but now we are back. So we'll be resuming with our user stories and practice sessions and our practical sessions very soon. So we'll start uploading the videos for different topics also. So we plan to go ahead with a small interview session with some questions and answers. And I have my friend with me who is also an interviewer. So we'll just go with some elementary questions and some answers. So going forward, we'll speed up the session with some tough questions also. Yeah. So, yeah. Sir, can you please?
Flow action, we have pre-processing, post-processing, and validation. What is the order of the execution?
So basically, yeah. So our interviewer has asked us a question on the flow action. So like the order of execution. So anyway, let me open the flow action and show you first, and like later on we'll go to the answer. So I'm just opening my application which I've created. It has some dummy rules in that. So obviously you'll have under the process, you should have the flow action. Open any flow action. So I'm just showing you this so that you don't forget it. Anyway, the theory part I'll like give the answer now, but just showing you in the actions tab, right? You have the pre-processing, you have the post-processing, as well as you have the validation here. Validation will be in here, meaning it's a tab. So as per Pega, right, what happens? So whenever you run a flow, right, the flow action gets executed and the flow action in turn shows you a section. So when you want to show some details to the user before loading of the section, you will write a data transform or you will write an activity, or in order to preload the data to the section, you will write some rule, either a DT or an activity in the pre-processing tab. So the pre-processing always occurs before the action is loaded. In our case, you can consider it as like before a section is loaded, this pre-processing will take place, or whatever rules you written in the pre-processing, those will execute. Now coming to the post-processing. So here itself they have mentioned post-processing. It occurs after validation passes and the action is submitted, meaning when the user is submitting the section or the screen. So there an action will get executed. In the post-processing also you have an option to call an activity or a data transform. So these rule will get executed when you submit, at a time when the user submits the section, provided the validation is passed. Meaning in the validation tab, if you have any validations here, you called any validate rule which validates some properties. So that validation should have passed. You see here it occurs upon submit of flow action and prior to executing any post-processing actions. So I hope this is clear. So let me give you the theory part. So pre-processing basically occurs before the action or the section is loaded. Post-processing occurs after validation is successful and the section is submitted. Validation, when does it happen? Validation occurs upon submit of flow action and before executing any post-processing actions. Yep.
Okay, moving on to the next question. Difference between local action and the flow action.
So basically this is a very common interview question. Like what is a local action, what is a flow action? So basically I have just defined a small table here. So if you go by the theory, right, a flow action is something which helps in progressing the case or moving forward. So whenever you create a flow, you will have multiple flow actions. So in each of the flow action, you will refer a particular section. So when you are going through a typical student onboarding process, so in the first screen, if you collect the student details and when you submit, in the next screen, like imagine in the first screen, you are collecting the name, the family details, the personal details of the student. So when he submits, obviously in the next screen, you will be collecting the address details and other details of the student. So it's a continuation where the user cannot skip the screen. So in those cases, that flow action or that particular event or that particular process which happens, so in those cases where it should be continuous and the flow shouldn't stop. So that's why I mentioned a flow action is something which helps in progressing the case or the flow forward. So those scenarios, you call it as you use the rule called as a flow action. The same flow action will behave as a local action. So how is it? Let me show you that. So if you open the flow action, I have again opened the same flow action rule. In the flow action, you have an option like used as local and a connector. If you give it as a local action, then you will find this particular section or this option coming under the actions button. Here if you see, there is an action, run, there's a preview, there's a refresh, add to favorites. See, like each of them is a local action. So they have used a navigation, and then the navigation menu they've called each of these particular options, which is nothing but a local action. So here if you do an actions and if you do a refresh, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to refresh the screen. So let me again come back. A flow action can behave as a local action as well as a connector action. Connector action is nothing but the other name of a flow action. So like it will connect the flow. Now going back. A flow action is something which helps in progressing the case and moving the flow forward. A local action is something which doesn't progress the case, but a screen will be shown to the user so that he can perform some action, like he can submit or he can cancel it. A local action is like always optional, it's not mandatory. But on the other hand, a flow action is mandatory. I have given a small example also. On click of next after filling some details in the collect info screen, we move to the verify information screen in read-only mode as defined in the stages and steps of any case type. So it cannot be skipped. Or take for example, if you have the Amazon, you ordered a product, you are going to the payment screen, and when you submit, obviously you will have to select like which mode of payment you are going to make. Then only you will be taken into the respective screen. If you select UPI, you will be shown the Google Apps, or you will be shown the Paytm, or you will be shown the PhonePe. So there is no option, you cannot skip this. That's why I mentioned the flow action is always mandatory. Now when you are doing a purchase order in the Amazon, you have an option to update the address. Like if you go by the explanation while doing a purchase order case type, the customer may or may not want to update his delivery address details. So it can be done from actions, then change address option. Like there you will get a section or your screen is loaded where the user can update his address. So he can either update the address or he can even cancel that. So this is totally optional. So that's what we call it as a local action.
Fine, moving on to the next question. What are the types of flows?
Yes, what are the different types of flows? Yeah. So in Pega, the backbone of any application, it is called as a flow. So in flow there are multiple types. If we go by the explanation again, a flow rule that contains no assignments and can execute from start to end without any human input, it is known as a straight-through process. Now going to the next one. A flow that consists of only assignments or decisions and meets other criteria, like it needs a human input, it is called as a screen flow. Now a flow which creates a new work object is called a starter flow, and a flow that is called from another flow is called as a subflow, and the calling flow is called as the parent flow.
When moving on to the next question, what is the difference between the access role and access role to object?
Okay. Now, so what is an access role and what is an access role to object? So this is related to security. So when anyone asks you in the interview, like have you worked upon the security rules, or if you know about the basics of security, you can directly tell him or explain him about this access role and access role to object. So what is the purpose of an access role? The purpose of an access role is to identify the actions that a group of users can perform. Now anyway, I will show you in the application what is it. Open your operator ID. So in your operator ID you have an access group. So when you open the access group, you will find something called as access role. If you scroll below, there is something known as available role. So here you can give the access role. So what is an access role as per the definition? So it identifies the actions the group of users can perform. So in my case, for example, it's ABCFW sysadmin 4, meaning I am the administrator. I have the admin privileges for this ABCFW application. So I may even also have an access role like ABC IMPL manager, meaning like it determines that I am a manager. I have a manager role for Tesco application. Or if you see this one, Tesco IMPL sysadmin, it means I have the admin role for the Tesco application. Now moving on to access role to object. So access role to object It is the capabilities that people can take on any instance, like they can create, update or delete any class instances. Let me open the access role. When you open access role, you will find access role to object. And if you still go ahead, right, in the access role to object, we'll have the following levels, like 0 to 5 you can define. 0 means you do not grant any user access, like the user can perform no action, obviously. Now if you give 2, it means the user can perform the create, update or delete actions on the class instances or any other instances till the development environment. If you give a 3, again you will have access up to test environment, from dev till test. I missed the 1. 1 means experimental region. Normally we don't have experimental region nowadays. Directly we have the development region, then test, then pre-production and production. So the number like determines like till which environment you have the access. 5 being the highest. So in my case, right, if you can see, I don't have any access roles defined yet, but let me open the Pegasus access role if I have any. So even that seems empty. Let me add a access role and show you. I'll use a Pegasus access role. I'm just opening this Pegasus basics. Even this is empty. The reason why I'm showing this is like when you are explaining someone, right, this will come to your mind and you will be able to easily answer them. You can directly use the theory as well, but I felt this would slightly help you guys. I hope this has some values. Yes, if you see here, they have an access class. They have read instance, write instance, delete instance, read rule, write rule, delete rule, execute reports, execute activities, privileges and some settings. If you see here, the first class is @base class. So you have a 5 access for everything, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Meaning like till production, your ID, if you have this particular access role, this will help you to have access of reading the instance, writing instance, deleting instance, and similar to the rules and like executing reports and activities as well. So you can even define a privilege in access role to object. So yes, so enter 0 or leave a blank to prohibit all access, and enter a value between 1 and 5 to provide access till the respective regions. Now yes, that's all.
Fine. Moving on to the next question. Can you define privilege and access?
Yes, both of them are again security rules. So privilege and access, when these are the most commonly used terms once again. So just the difference is just a one word difference here. So when you want to restrict actions on a particular assignment, so you can use a privilege. Meaning like when you want to restrict some actions in a particular screen or a particular section which you're rendering to the user, you will use a privilege. I'll show you where a privilege is used. Once again, go to a flow action. Flow action in the security tab, you can see an option to call a privilege. You have a privilege class, or you can even find it here in the layout also. In the security, you have the option to define a privilege. So if you define a privilege, you can restrict, unless the user has that particular access, he will be restricted from performing any action in the particular section. Privilege is sort of a when rule. That's fine. Now moving on to access when. So to restrict creating or initiating any new request or a new case type, we need to use access when. Basically, when you need to do some restrictions on the flow level, on the entire flow, not on a single screen or anything, on the entire flow or case type level, you will go for access when. Meaning when you want to restrict a user from creating a case for a particular case type like student onboarding, you will go for access when. And in a student onboarding case type, when you want the user to be restricted to only approve the student admission when he meets the criteria or when he has met some academic privileges or academic criteria, then only you can approve the admission of the student. So there you will go for a privilege. Yes.
And moving on to the next question. What is access control, authorization and authentication?
Yes, as the question sounds. So access control, authorization and authentication. Let me start with authorization first. Authorization determines what data the user can view and what actions the user can perform. This again seems like our access role to object. So basically you have different users logging into different applications. So you restrict or like you have some filters to prevent them from performing some actions. Now going ahead to the authentication. Whenever you log into the Pega application, you provide a user ID and password which authenticates you, meaning like if you really have access to that application, you will be allowed to enter the application. If not, you will be mentioned invalid user ID credentials and you are not authenticated to login. So authentication confirms the identity of the user and verifies if he is able to access the application. Finally, going to access control. As the name suggests, you are controlling the access basically. So what the user can do is being basically controlled by you. If you can see here, some users can only create cases while other users may be responsible for reviewing the cases. So what level of access you have over a particular case is called as an access control.
And moving on to the next question, how operator ID is linked to the access role?
Okay, so basically how an operator ID is linked to the access role. Since we've already seen how an operator ID looks like and like what are its configurations, so we need to give the mental mapping or like we need to provide the mapping like how it's linked. So an operator ID is mapped to the access group. So when you once again open the access group, you have the access role. When you once again open the access role, you will see the access role to object, which in turn has the privileges. Let me open one by one. So this is the operator ID, ABC user, meaning I am the user of this application. I have ABC framework authors access group. Inside that access group, I have the access role, which is nothing but under the available roles tab. You have the access role. When you open the access role as usual, I am opening this Pega roles access role. You will have the access role to object. So in the access role to object, just click on the class. When you click on the class, it will show you the different access roles which have been given. If you can see, enter 0 to prohibit all access, values to between 1 and 5 to provide access. If any access when is given, in that case the access when will take privilege or it will take precedence at the runtime. Even when you give 5 here, when the access when is becoming false, Pega will consider access when and this will not be taken precedence. You can see privileges once again in the access role to object. So this is the linking here. Operator ID to access group to access role to access role to object, and inside the access role to object you can define privileges. Yes guys, so I'm done. So this is the session for today. So we'll meet you once again with a different session. Like yeah, thank you sir for your valuable time and like coordination. So we'll meet you once again guys in the next session with some more interview questions. Please do like, share and subscribe, and please mention your comments also, because we are looking forward to your valuable suggestions and comments, so that like it will benefit all the people or all the viewers or subscribers who wants to like learn more in Pega. Yep. Thank you team.
Thank you guys. Signing off.
Yeah. Bye guys.